that moment when there is a scene in this episode of Grimoire of Zero that is very similar to a scene in Spice and Wolf. And the scene I'm talking about is the scene when Zero talks to the mercenary and says, "I'm going to put a curse on you," and the mercenary kind of shrugs it off. There was a scene like that very similar in Season 2 of Spice and Wolf, Episode 7 to be exact, that had Holo and Lawrence talking, and then you had to where Holo was like, "Oh, should I dispel the curse I put on you," and all that. And it's just a very interesting dynamic between those two characters in Spice and Wolf. And that was what kind of happened in this episode between the mercenary and Zero. So, I just gotta say, once again, a lot of Spice and Wolf vibes I'm getting from this series, and I really appreciate that. Now, I don't think it's at the level of Spice and Wolf in my opinion, because obviously I'm a little bit biased towards Spice and Wolf, but I do say that there is a lot of similar vibes I'm getting from this series, and the way the characters interact, it's not completely focused on action or anything like that. Like I said, I could see why I am being reminded of Spice and Wolf and why many others are as well. So, this episode is more chillax once again. There's not really much action, which this episode did set up for some serious stuff in next week's episode, but overall, once again, another episode focusing on the characters' chemistry, how they can interact with each other, and how the world is around them. And it was very fascinating, because these are one of the things I really like in fantasy adventure type series, because a lot of series like this, especially when they're based off of light novel series, they tend to be more focused around the action and all that. They don't really try to focus in on the world building to just the environment or anything. They just want to always focus on that action and all that. And I like the pacing of this series. Many might disagree with me and say that maybe the pacing of Grimoire of Zero is a little bit slow or whatever, or maybe it's just there's not much really going on besides characters talking, but personally I am fine with that. I love the direction of the series and where it's going these past couple episodes, and I also love the way the characters interact, and some of the exchanges they have is very interesting because it's not the typical reaction you would get out of characters, especially from a light novel series, which I've said many times beforehand in my previous episode reviews of Grimoire of Zero. So let's talk about that for a second, okay? So, in this episode, once again, we get to find out a little bit more about Zero and kind of how her upbringing was. A little bit more characterization, so to speak. And apparently Zero, she knows about love, she knows about all these other little things, she knows about these very Arrow-type stuff going on, especially with demon dicks or something. Like, well, what the fuck is going on there? Is there, like, what? But, basically, we get a little bit of characterization for Zero and how she always lived in a cave. She always had everything she wanted, for instance, to learn and, knowledge and all of that. She doesn't really know if she ever really met her parents. She probably did, but she didn't really care because overall she had everything she wanted. She got to research and learn things about magic, and she was basically doing anything she wanted. The only thing about the place her upbringing was is that it didn't really serve good food, which resulted in her apparently making her book, her grimoire, which that's very interesting. So the reason why this book of Zero was even made in the first place was because of her wanting to be able to have some better food. Interesting when you think about it like that, but overall though, I gotta say, I like the characterization we got, but once again hinting that she is definitely older than meets the eye, and like I said, there is some wisdom there. Even though she looks young and all that, I do like characters that definitely have more to them than meets the eye, especially wisdom or stuff that, you never would expect from them, and that's kind of what we're getting from Zero throughout this journey, which when she's with, Mercenary. So, let's talk about the exchange, okay, with the Mercenary in Zero and how she's like, oh, what's that? Like, what are they doing? Like, why are they putting their lips together? Because since she's always been in, a cave, she's just learned magic and stuff, obviously she wouldn't kind of know about those certain things, and because of that, she's like, what is that? And she knows what love is, but she didn't know what that represented, and it clearly shows in the middle of this episode that she does enjoy and appreciate the time she's spending with the mercenary, and so she wants to be with him for a good long while, because, I mean, you gotta remember this, she's been in a cave her entire life, and this is like her first time really ever being outside, probably having someone to hang out with and chill with, so obviously this is brand new to her. It's all these new experiences she's never had before, and so experiencing this with the mercenary, obviously, she's just having having a hell of a fun time, and because of that, she doesn't want these happy times to end, and I don't feel like it's really necessarily love that she is feeling towards him. It's just the fact that she has so many new things happening around her, she just doesn't want that to end, which is why she's loving him for that. So I feel like I said, it's not love at this moment. I'm not saying eventually that might not happen in the future, but at this time, no, I don't think it really is. And also, the mercenary, I feel like he's more of like a father figure than anything else when it comes to her because of the exchanges we've had throughout, you know, the episodes thus far. Regardless, though, let's talk about Albus, you know, the third will of the journey. His character wasn't as bad in this latest episode compared to previous episodes. Like I've already said about his character, if there is going to be any, like, romance between the mercenary and Zero, he's mainly there to kind of put a block on that. Kind of similar to how Cole was in Spice and Wolf, and personally, I'm not the biggest fan of that type of stuff. Those overall events with the character just being there, and the whole purpose is the character to slow down maybe progress between the characters, but I do say, because of this episode, he wasn't as annoying. It seems like I'm slowly starting to accept him for who he is in this series. Kind of how I felt about Cole when he was first introduced in Spice and Wolf. I remember I didn't like him at all when he first came into the story, and then after a couple of volumes, I slowly understood, I'm like, you know what, he's not that bad of a character. So maybe something very similar to that in Spice and Wolf might happen to Albus as we continue down this journey. So yeah, with all that being said, we have setup for next week's episode, which results in something grim and dark happening, because this village that they're going to, like the entire journey for this episode is they're going to this village, there's a lot of flags, like, pop up throughout this episode, and Albus causes these flags. He's like, oh, it's a great village, you know, oh, you know, this dog always loves me and always comes up to me, and, you know, good food or whatever. Just always these little details throughout this episode that was just setting up these flags, like death flags, like the village is dead as hell. And throughout the episode, I knew something bad was going to happen, because it's very obvious the way they were just trying to constantly talk about this village, and then when they finally got there and they smelt smoke, and it definitely wasn't like burning food or whatever, obviously it's bodies and stuff. So yeah, it went a little bit dark towards the end of this episode, and that's setting up for whatever's going to happen, so most likely the plot's going to be kicking into high gear when next week's episode. Now, one of the big things I need to talk about now is the theme that this series has been doing, and I haven't really discussed this, and so I kind of want to dive into it right now, and there's a very apparent theme going on throughout these episodes when it comes to witches and Beastfallen. Now, I've kind of slightly dived into this, but not enough, so I kind of want to give my thoughts on the entire event of this, and kind of how witches are very similar to Beastfallen. So as we know, our main character, he's a Beastfallen, and ever since he was young, he's always been, you know, put in environments to where people don't like him. For instance, nobody wants him around, he always has to be by himself, people are always after him, trying to hunt him down, whatever. He's been in a very bad environment, nobody really likes him at all, he's always on the run, and people think, you know, he's a beast, he's not, you know, human at all, and he will just go complete savage and eat all of them, or whatever. That's what everybody feels when it comes to Beastfallen. They completely misjudge them. They think one bad Beastfallen, you know, goes to all Beastfallen, and all of them are bad. And that's kind of what the main male character's trying to point out, like, you know, I'm not really that bad of a guy, but because of some other Beastfallen, it makes it look like I'm a bad guy as well, which gives me a bad name, and then it causes it to where nobody wants to be around me at all. And because of this entire situation, we know what type of life our, you know, main male characters lived, but this can also be said for the witches as well, and we get to see that from Albus in this latest episode, but also throughout the episodes we've seen thus far as well. We know that there's good witches, and there's bad witches. We know there's both sides, just like Beastfallen. We know there's, you know, good Beastfallen and bad Beastfallen, and that's kind of what the story is trying to show right now, that what was being done to our main male character, the mercenary, how he was constantly just, you know, being picked on, or, you know, people are saying we don't want you around because of what you are, or whatever, you know, he had to experience that, and he understood how wrong it was, their viewpoint, but then he was doing the exact same thing to the witches, and now his eyes are starting to open up. He realized how wrong he was, because not all witches are bad. Not all witches want to cause chaos and kill people or whatever. There are some good witches out there, and so because of that, the main male character is realizing how much of a hypocrite he was when it came to his viewpoint on witches. Now, speaking of witches, let's also talk about the magic real quick, okay? I really like the little subtle detail throughout this episode that was kind of building up to where how useful magic is. Magic is very useful, and it was helping out our characters amongst their journey. Lighting a fire, catching fish, cooking, whatever. all this was helpful, very helpful, all this magic, and you saw the main male character, the way he was reacting, he's like, that's very useful, like, that's really good to have. I mean, it definitely speeds up progress, it helps out healing magic as well, and that's just some stuff that, you know, she could just do like that. And because of that, that makes the journey a hell of a lot easier, but also just shows that, you know, magic is a good thing as well. It's not just a bad thing, it can be used for good. And he's also noticing that, which goes with the theme of how, you know, witches are misjudged, and so is Beastfallen. So, yeah, very good episode, love what I saw, can't wait to see what happens next. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I love you all so much. Please be safe. Chibi out.